I'd like to start out by saying I'm not someone to scare easily. I don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, so it needs to be more real for it to scare me. Our family moved into an old farm we acquired through a local land auction. We were tired of city living and moved to the country. It's a fairly large for us new farmers, measuring 22 acres of raw farmland surrounded by woods from the federal national forest. My father has decided to begin farming sweet yellow corn. We could sell it at our nearby local farmers market, and our family loves to roast barbecue corn with dinner on a regular basis. There is a pond on the south end of the property that is on the federal lands, so your occasional fishermen are seen fishing for the large elusive bass people tell stories about. I was getting my dirt bike filled with gas and oil along with my brother. We were planning to take a ride through the woods to find some new cool trails we can drive around on. I have a 250cc dirt bike, so it has a lot of power. I took off and left my brother in the dust as he has a smaller bike than mine. I could hear his engine revving behind me, attempting to catch up, so I slowed down to wait for him. We were towards the end of our farm property when we saw a man sitting next to the pond in a foldable beach chair listening to his radio. The air smelled like pot. I think the guy was smoking a joint. I turned to my brother and signaled he was smoking, and my brother laughed as he could smell the aroma in the air. The elderly man with the joint still in his mouth turned to us and waved. He motioned to come over, but I pretended I didn't notice and drove off into the woods with my brother following along. We found some cool motorcycle paths. We drove around for about 1 or 2 hours and decided to head back since our bikes were almost out of gas. We had to pass by the pond again, where we saw the older man hanging out. I was hoping he left already, as I didn't want to stop and risk running out of gas. As we pulled to the pond, the man was attempting to put his boat in the water using a long rope. He was struggling, so I figured I would pull up and give him some extra muscle to help launch the boat. The man said, "Hello, young man. Can I get a hand?" I said sure, as I held the end of the rope so that the boat wouldn't slip over the edge of the pond and bang into the rocks. The boat slowly slid into the water, where the man slowly climbed into his boat. He asked if I could hand him the cooler on the bank, and I said sure, as I picked it up and leaned it on the nose of the small boat as the man pulled it in. The boat almost tipped over from the weight of the cooler as I smiled, but the older man looked a little angry as he almost tipped over in the water. He wasn't wearing your typical outdoor clothes. He was rather formal for being out here alone, almost as if he came from church, then decided to hang out near the pond. I went back to the house and grabbed my fishing pole as my brother went inside to shower up since he was full of mud from falling on his bike out in the woods. I walked back to the pond and I could see the elderly man towards the middle of the pond near an old bush sticking out of the water. He paddled towards me and said, "Come on, young man, there's a great spot over by the bush with large fish." Not thinking much of it, I hopped in the boat and he paddled over to the bush in the water. I began casting my line for about 5 minutes with no luck. The man was silent the entire time. I asked him, "What's your name, sir?" He looked and in a groan said, "Bill." "Nice to meet you, Bill," I said, as he sat there quietly watching the water. About 40 minutes had gone by with not much talk, and I asked Bill, "How long are you staying out here, Bill?" As he replied, "We're staying here all day." My blood pressure slowly began rising as I could feel my heart beating just slightly harder as Bill said we were staying here and not him. I asked Bill if we could paddle to the side of the bank as I was going to wrap up the fishing since I wasn't getting any bites. Bill turned to me and said, "Sorry, young man, I can't do that." At that moment, Bill opened his cooler and inside there were no drinks or ice. It was a pistol with a hatchet. I freaked out and said, "Look, sir, I don't want any trouble. Please just paddle to shore." Bill ignored my request, just looking out in the woods. At this point, I took action into my own hands and jumped into the water. I attempted to swim underneath the brown, murky water, avoiding to surface for air in case I was going to be harmed. I gasped for a breath of air and descended underneath, swimming towards the edge of the pond in an attempt to get out safely. I made it to the end of the pond and Bill was still sitting in his small boat staring into the woods, completely ignoring me as I crawled out onto the bank. I had lost my fishing pole in the water when I dove in, which really sucks as that was my only fishing pole I had on our new farm. I slowly jogged on land, looking back at Bill, still sitting in his boat. I could see my house in the distance and I wasn't slowing down at all. I finally made it home and told my mother about a creepy old man with a gun that is out fishing near the pond. My mother locked the doors of the house and told us to stay in for the day until our father comes back home in a few hours. It's been 2 weeks since this encounter and everything seems back to normal. Our corn is slowly sprouting for this summer harvest. The days are getting hotter and hotter and we don't have any air conditioning in our home. My father set up 2 hammocks connected to the wooden post holding up our porch. I sometimes spend the night on the hammock to enjoy the cool night breeze. It was another calm night and I had fallen asleep in the hammock. It was dark. As I turned on my iPhone to check the time, it was 3 in the morning. I was getting chilly, so I decided to go inside. As I sat up on the hammock, there he was. It was the same man I encountered by the pond, Bill. He was sitting in a chair in our cornfield just staring at my house. I rubbed my eyes to clear up my vision as I thought I might just be seeing a shadow, but no, it was definitely Bill, and he slowly stood up and began walking towards me. I jumped out of the hammock and ran inside my house. Everyone was sleeping, so I didn't want to wake anybody up. I ran into my bedroom and hopped in bed, hiding under the blankets, keeping the lights off to avoid being seen. That's when I heard Bill's voice next to my window. "I didn't mean to scare you, young man. Could you help me pull my boat out of the pond?" I had no idea why he was here in the middle of the night asking for help. I stayed silent and I did not respond. Then I heard tapping on my window. I covered my head with my blanket since we had not put blinds on our windows yet. I could see a light outside of my window as if someone was walking with a flashlight. After a few hours, I ended up falling asleep. I don't want to tell anyone in my family what I encountered tonight. I'm not sure if I should report this to the police or talk about it with my parents. I'm going to college in about 2 months. Maybe I'll just keep this story to myself.